Hi, it's me, Shovatar, your boy, back again with another video about a game, what is allegedly a game, called Castlevania Dracula X. If you've been paying attention to the videos that I've been posting, you might notice that this game looks remarkably similar to Rondo of Blood in some respects, and the similarities are certainly notable. They are undeniable, but I think the fact that people refer to this game, I have heard people refer to this game as a remake, or in some horribly, horribly misinformed cases, a port of Rondo of Blood. This is not a port of Rondo of Blood. This is a completely different game, and should be considered as a completely different game. It just reuses a lot of the same assets that Rondo of Blood has, and I mean, so does fucking Symphony of the Night. People don't call Symphony of the Night a fucking Rondo of Blood remake. Um, but Dracula X shares the same premise as Rondo of Blood, so it's sort of like a, you could think of it as like a what-if retelling of an existing story, as in, what if when Richter Belmont went to go save his girlfriend from Dracula, everything was really shitty. Dracula X, Castlevania Dracula X is, I sort of think of it in a similar way that I do Super Castlevania 4, where this game is not exactly bad, but I think it's worse than Super Castlevania 4 because the annoyances come from the core gameplay. Right off the bat, something that I'm going to point out that immediately kneecaps this game is the fact that Richter moves. I guess I should explain what this game is and why this game exists. So, Rondo of Blood was released in Japan for the PC Engine, which we in the United States call the TurboGrafx 16. And I think Konami wanted to. I guess they didn't want to release it in America because I guess the TurboGrafx wasn't as popular in America as it was in Japan, maybe? For some reason they didn't want to release Rondo in America. Maybe they thought like the anime aesthetic like wouldn't work, so they set about making a different version to sell to the West for the Super Nintendo. And due to exclusivity obligations with the PC Engine people, they could not make a direct port or a direct remake. They had to make a different game. They could use the same shit, like the same monsters, a lot of the same bosses reappear in this game, but they had to make it like a different game, and they succeeded. And I also think that they may have taken on board some of the complaints about Rondo, specifically the complaint that the game was too easy. And also, if you look at Castlevania games in the past, there's a trend of the American versions of the games being more difficult than the Japanese versions. I'm thinking mostly about Castlevania 3. And so I think that here's this game made for the West, and it's sort of trying to correct things with Rondo of Blood that the game thinks are issues but are not. And the big thing, the huge problem, like I think I started to say earlier, the thing that kneecaps this game is the fact that Richter can't fucking move. He, in the journey from Japan to the United States, he like shit his pants or something, and he forgot how to run, and so he just does this little waddle across the screen for the entire game. And the only way to make yourself go forward any faster is to jump, which is something that you are, because you're walking so slowly, it's like you constantly want to be jumping forward, but the game does what a lot of Castlevania games do, which is throw enemies at you that if you're like jumping around all over the place because you can't control your jump trajectory, and you can't like whip downwards in midair, you will never be able to react properly to them in time. And in other Castlevania games, that's fine, because you don't need to like jump around everywhere and like commit to jumps to move. But in this game you do, because for some fucking reason, Richter Belmont can't fucking move in Dracula X. And I suspect it has something to do with the objective of making the game harder than Rondo and, like, I don't know, like, I guess feel more like older Castlevania games, i.e., extremely frustrating and difficult in ways that are less fun, I guess, is what they thought a Castlevania game was. Like, moving really slowly was Christopher Belmont's thing. Like, Simon Belmont is not known for his, like, extremely slow walking speed, and I have to conclude that it's a deliberate design decision on the part of the developers, because fucking Simon Belmont in Super Castlevania 4 doesn't fucking walk like he just shit his pants, you know? He just walks normally. The Richter in this game, I don't know what the fuck his problem is. I don't know why they decided to do this, but it just fucks the entire game. And another thing that they did was that they sort of incorporated Castlevania challenges that, like, resemble previous games' Castlevania challenges in a broad sense, where it's like, oh, we've got pits, we've got, like, bats, we've got, like, Medusa heads, we've got, like, tight jumps, but all of it just feels like shit because you are playing as this character that can't fucking move for some reason. And also, a lot of the boss fights are just, like, the fact that you can't... Okay, so these are like bosses from Rondo, but a lot of the Rondo bosses were designed around you having the ability to move, and then Dracula X taking away the ability to move, but keeping the same bosses is sort of like... I mean, I'll give them credit. This game is definitely harder than Rondo of Blood, but it's also about 10 times less fun to play, because some of the most fun thing about Rondo of Blood was just like moving around. Was how it achieved a nice balance of, like, classic Castlevania movement, and then, like, a few tweaks here and there to make you feel like you had more reactive options and were more in control. This game is just like a fucking shit show, in terms of the movement, because Richter's boots are full of molasses for the whole game. Like, okay, so I'm 7.5 minutes into this commentary, and I've barely talked about anything except for the fact that Richter can't fucking move, but I'm just gonna keep talking about it, because it just needs to be emphasized over and over and over again to establish that this is, like, the biggest problem with the game. Some of the level design is questionable. I think, like I started to say before, the game is sort of enamored with the idea of Medusa heads and bats coming at you over, like, platforming sections, and there's some tricky jumps, but part of the reason the jumps are so tricky is because you can't fucking move. So you can't get, like, a good running start on certain platforms. And that's really, like, a secondary issue. The gigantic issue really is the movement speed. There are some other small changes made between this game and Rondo, so I'm going to point out real quick here is that these spear guys are much, much harder to fight in this game than they are in Rondo. I don't know if it's come across in any of the footage so far of me fighting those guys, but basically they gave them an active range that is much further forward, where, like, when they spin their spear around, they, like, do damage in front of them in a very long range. So there's a very specific position you have to be at to both hit them with the whip and then also not get hit when they do their, like, little spinny thing. So the purple lance dudes went from being basically like cannon fodder in Rondo of Blood to, well, you kind of have to respect them. You can't just, like, walk up to them and just, like, erase them, but they became about 3 times more difficult in Dracula X than they are in Rondo, and that has more to do with just the added range they gave them, and less to do with the fact that you can't fucking move in Dracula X, although that is, of course, a factor. There are multiple endings to Dracula X, dependent upon several factors, dependent upon how many of the ladies you save. In Dracula X, Dracula has kidnapped Maria and Annette. The other 2 chicks are not present in this retelling, and Maria is not a playable character. You're stuck with slow-ass Richter Belmont with poop in his pants, because I guess the Japanese didn't think that Western audiences would want to play as a cute little girl. They just figured they'd want to play as the big burly manly man dripping with testosterone. Probably right. Last thing that Konami needs is for American audiences to think that their game is gay. So I don't know. The marketers are probably correct in that assumption. And the reason that I dropped down between those pillars there, they're like I didn't like do the last part of level 3, is because this is how you get the bad ending. Is if you fuck up that platforming section with the pillars and you fall through the pillars, you go to alternate level 4, which locks you into the bad ending. Because Maria is imprisoned on normal 4, so if you go to alternate 4, you can't free Maria. And Maria gives you the key that you need to access alternate 5, which is where Annette is. So you can't free Maria and you can't free Annette, and that's the bad ending. The other two endings are the good ending if you just free Maria, but you don't go to alternate 5 and you don't rescue Annette. And then the best ending is where you rescue Maria and Annette. And I'm going to be posting videos for all 3 of these. It's going to be Deathless for the good ending and the bad ending, and then a 1cc for the best ending. And I'll explain why that's the case when I commentate that video. But I just want to explain what's going on. It's also worth noting the Dracula X doesn't have a hard mode. That's fine. It kind of feels like a hard mode in and of itself. And a lot of the boss fights in Dracula X, okay, this guy, fighting this guy in Rondo is perfectly fine. Fighting this guy in Dracula X when you can't fucking move is just it just feels so much worse. I don't know. I guess I should be backflipping, right? But I'm used to Rondo. I'm used to just being able to walk away from those fuckers when they do that shit, and then just fucking killing them. Oh, interesting thing to note about the sub weapons is that the sub weapons in this game you can fire them faster. You can use them. You can it kind of functions like a triple shot. You can have more than one of them on the screen at the same time, but rather than getting a triple shot upgrade, you just get the ability to fire more crosses or more axes if you have more hearts. I'm 95% sure that's how it works, because when I'm low on hearts, I tend to only be able to throw one axe, and then when I have 86, 88 hearts like this, I'm just spamming axes like there's no tomorrow. So I'm guessing it's based on the heart count to incentivize constantly picking up hearts to keep yourself in the range where you have the triple shot equivalent effect. And it's important for this game to give you a reason to hoard hearts, because in comparison to Rondo of Blood, item crashes in this game have been severely nerfed. And I talked in my Rondo of Blood video about my feelings of ambivalence towards item crashes. And I'm not going to say anything about this boss because this is the fucking easiest boss in the game. You just do this. If you come into this boss room with the axe, you cannot lose. This guy will just get fucking demolished. And Phase 2 actually is an even clearer example of that. Just check this shit out. He just fucking gets erased. Oh yeah, and there's no Bible in Dracula X, which means that the axe is now essentially uncontested as the best sub-weapon in the game. With a couple of exceptions where you'd want the cross for situational business. But generally speaking, it's going to be the axe. What the fuck was I talking about? Shit, I completely fucking lost my train of thought. I was talking about, item crashes. Yeah, I complained in my Rondo of Blood commentary that item crashes feel sort of like calling in a tactical nuke. Feels like you didn't really do anything. But if you're gonna have item crashes in the game, they should do something. And the idea that I could spend 20 hearts on a holy water item crash and not even fucking kill the things on the screen with me is ridiculous. Item crashes do not exist to soften enemies up so that you can then finish them off. They exist so that you have a button that that actually kills things. My solution, if you're gonna put item crashes in your game, just increase the fucking heart cost. Don't keep item crashes in your game and then make them useless, because you've now eliminated the upside that the mechanic had, which was its actual practical efficacy, and the fact that it could be used to solve problems that nothing else could. But item crashes in this game don't do that. Like, I am going to use an item crash later in this level to solve a problem in a way that I don't think any other solution available to me could solve the problem. But that is a big... That's going to come with a big asterisk, and you'll see why the asterisk is there when I get to the end. When I get to the fucking part where I do it. So for now I'm just going to talk about this level. They decided to put the SNES rendition of the best Castlevania song of all time in a normal level that more people were likely to see than Alternate 5 and Rondo. So that's nice. Okay, so here's what's happening here. What's happening here is that the smartasses who made this game decided that these guys were too easy to fight, and so they wanted to make them harder to fight. But in a game like Castlevania, if you make enemies too hard to fight, then in a game as hard as Dracula X, enemies that are too hard to fight, now it no longer becomes practical to fight them at all. If there's a method, if there's a way to just circumvent them, then that suddenly becomes the most desirable option because you made them so fucking hard to fight. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to bait them away from the stairs so I can just drop down the stairs, go down the second set of stairs, and then just completely bypass them altogether. So because of the obnoxious way in which these fuckers are designed, I'm now reduced to waiting, which I think I've said before that waiting is the least fun thing, excuse me, you can do in a video game. With perhaps maybe some exceptions. It depends on your definition of waiting. Like, I have to wait when I fight these guys because I have to, like, stop attacking them for a few seconds. But, oh yeah, that's the other thing. You also fucking, like, backflip more slowly, so you have to respect these guys way more, and because that guy was half off the screen, I couldn't see his fucking sword arm being raised up, so I couldn't see if he was telegraphing an attack or not. Although I don't think it would have necessarily mattered. The one balancing factor for these Sword Knights in Dracula X is that they did nerf their health. The Rondo Sword Knights, I believe, take 8 whips to kill, whereas with these guys it's only 6. So I guess that was nice of them. But none of these accommodations would be necessary if they just hadn't stapled your fucking feet to the floor and filled Richter's pants with shit, which is what they did. Quite inexplicably in this game. And here is an interesting thing where I can actually go up and down the stairs to continually respawn this meat that's in the torch, because it's a candle meat and not a wall meat. And there's a reason why that exists, and it's because this little patch here is like, I don't know, they were fucking trolling or something. So here I am using 3 item crashes to kill these guys, spending 30 hearts to kill a room full of enemies, which is basically like what an item crash should do. And the thing is, that using the axe item crash, 3 axe item crashes to kill those guys is unironically the best available option. Because you then need to kill this guy, who never walks far away enough from the ledge to make jumping over to the ledge viable. So he just like hangs out camping on the ledge, and if you throw across at him, he'll just block it with his spear. But the axe can kind of go over his spear and like actually hit him on the head. So you can't bring a cross to the part with the three spear knights. And anyway, the item crashes for the cross and the holy water are so fucking feeble that you would need to spend 2, if not 3 item crashes to kill all 3 of those. So let's do some math here. 2 holy water item crashes, let's be generous and say 2, would be 40 hearts to kill all 3 of them. The cross item crash is kind of inconsistent in its damage because it like shoots a bunch of projectiles over the place, so we'll say 3 for that. That's 45 hearts. Whereas with the axe, 3 axe item crashes kill them all, that's 30 hearts. And you get a sub-weapon that's better for the subsequent axe knight. So that's why, or subsequent spear knight. And so now here we are with the werewolf, another boss that's designed around Richter having the ability to move, that they kind of toned down. For one thing, I like the change that they made to the werewolf's fireball attack, actually, where it's now dodgeable. It doesn't just like fucking track your position. And what is this guy's? Okay, there he is. And like this shit is just like fucking dumb. I don't know. I mean, that werewolf fight was fine, I guess, but the fact that you are so much slower and the werewolf is barely barely any slower, if at all, just makes the fight fucking ridiculous. But all they had was the shit from Rondo, so you gotta put a werewolf boss fight in there that's designed for a totally different movement pace. Oh well. Here we are on level 6. Level 6 is the last big hazard in a run like this. Because it's got death pits, it's got some platforming, it's got the most irritating combat I've ever experienced in a game, with maybe like a couple of exceptions from Castlevania 3. Shocking. Absolutely shocking how far they regressed with this game into all of the worst decisions of Castlevania 1 and 3 and none of the good decisions. Like, or I should say all of the bad decisions of previous Castlevania entries, because they decided to incorporate Christopher Belmont's fucking limp into Richter Belmont. Okay, so this room here, there's a whole right part of this room, and there's a meat over there, which I might want because I'm missing health, right? Problem is there's more of those like rising rocks over on the right there, and there's respawning bats coming at you. And respawning bats plus insta-kill pits means you're rolling the fucking dice every time you fuck with it. So it's always, always, always safer if you're doing a Deathless run, or if you're doing like a 1cc where like you don't want to die, which is what a 1cc is. I would say it's always smarter to skip that beat. Unless you're literally like one shot away from death, then just fucking ignore it and then just jump up the blocks and completely bypass the whole section. This part actually is really hard, but I didn't really get a chance to talk about it because I was busy talking about the last room. It involves the second spear guy trying to fight him, basically trying to attack the second spear guy safely without the axe, like hitting him from below, is impossible because his range is super long and there's constantly respawning bats coming at you. So like if you try to fight him directly, you just get knocked around by the spear, you just get knocked around by the bats. It's really awful. Excuse me, sorry. And it's especially galling because this level is really hard, and the fact that meat is effectively unattainable because it's just not an intelligent risk to go for it in 90% of situations. There's only one meat between the start of the level and the boss, which is a different boss depending on the ending you're on track to get. So here I've got the bad ending, so I'm going to be fighting Camilla. Same with the good ending, and then in the best ending you fight Death himself. Speaking of Death, and I'm going to have to save my comments on that fight for when it happens. But the Death fight is the thing that primarily makes the best ending the hardest to get, in my opinion. Alternate 5 is also highly, highly obnoxious, and does a lot of like Dracula X's favorite thing, which is throwing enemies at you that you can't possibly see, to punish you for jumping, aka to punish you for trying to like move forward quickly after they broke Richter's kneecaps. But once you learn that shit, the big problem is really just the Death fight. And you'll notice there that this boss is sort of an incorporation of Shaft, Furado. Excuse me, sorry. I don't know why I'm yawning so much. Sun's going down. Yeah, Shaft is not present in this retelling of the story. I don't know why. Maybe they didn't want to have like a bad guy. Well, they could just change his name. I don't know. I don't know why Shaft isn't here. Maybe they thought that was like muddying the situation too much. Not that Rondo of Blood ever really establishes who exactly Shaft is in the first place anyway. I mean, it's because it's not very difficult to guess. He's an evil magician who works for Dracula. Like, there's nothing else about him really that's important. He's got a bitchin' cape, I guess. Level 7 is actually kind of interestingly designed. As much as I've been ragging on this game, just like with Castlevania 4, there are things that I like, although I think that the problems with Dracula X are much more fundamental than the problems with 4. Um, I will admit 7 is intriguingly designed because there's a part at the very end before the last room before Dracula where there are moving platforms with Medusa heads, and if you fall off the moving platforms, you basically have to go back through an earlier section of the level. But you can also take advantage of something that happens here to go back earlier in the level. And here, even though the axe is really good, I'm actually going to ditch it to go back out into this room that I was just in to grab the cross instead. Because there are 3 lance armor guys on the way up to the last hallway before Dracula. That little, the series of ascending platforms that I was on before. Let me just say something. Attacking this guy is really specific. Your timing has to be, like, so... You have to be so prompt with your timing, and, like, jumping down and hitting him as soon as he finishes his first attack, because otherwise he does an attack where he'll, like, shit out a bunch of bones, and it's, like, really, really difficult to not take any damage from them. So yeah, this is why I picked up the cross. You literally, purely to item crash that one guy. And you might notice, like, earlier in the commentary I said that a cross item crash wouldn't kill a lance armor. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Like that guy right there, sometimes he dies to that, and sometimes he doesn't die to it. And this is the other place where the cross is really important, is this part right here, where Medusa heads are coming out of the fucking edge of the screen where you can't fucking see, to knock you off the platform and knock you back earlier in the level and waste your fucking time. And that one there actually somehow manages to clip me on the way out by brushing its, like, chin against the very fucking edge of my left shoulder. And I think I took a hit earlier from a turret on the staircase in the first room of level 6 that was, like, fucking absurd, where the fireball, like, legitimately looked like it didn't even hit me, but apparently it did. One big thing that is different about... I mean, well, Dracula is a different game, but what feels very different in this game is the Dracula fight. And the Dracula fight is another good example of excessive difficulty leading to, like, a badly designed game, like an unfun gameplay experience, where the fact that this room is full of insta-kill pits, and yes, those gaps, all those gaps in the pillars will kill you, means that it is never safe to be aggressive. The safest thing to do is to do what I'm doing right here, which is stay next to that low pillar, the lowest pillar that's in the frame right now, the one that's sort of like tucked up against the pillar on the far right, is extremely important because if you duck on that pillar, then you will avoid Dracula's magma attack that you can't just intercept with the axe or the whip the way that you can his fireball attack. So that spot is extremely, extremely important for that reason. And I don't. But the reason that I don't camp on that spot is because I can always get back to that if I'm in either of the pillars next to it. I can always get back to it in time before a magma ball comes out. And the way that I know that a magma ball is going to come out is that he follows a pattern of, for the first 4 attacks, his 4th one is the magma ball, and then after that every 5th attack is the magma ball. So whenever he's on his 5th attack, I always jump down there and just preemptively crouch until it's over until he starts doing it again. And then phase 2 is another case of spamming the axe, but what's really important to do in phase 2 actually is to duck whenever possible because that reduces knockback, and also stay on, like, the edge of the pillar closest to him, because his fireballs are extremely difficult to dodge, and if you get hit by them, you just don't want to get knocked off. So that's sort of how you accommodate for the fact that there are pits in this fight, is by positioning yourself so that you don't get knocked off. And the fact that phase 1 involves so much waiting is really not fun. I kind of think it's ridiculous that they... Because his patterns are literally random. It's not like you can learn where he's going to go and, like, camp him when he shows up. No, no, no. Totally random, as far as I can tell. So you just have to... The smartest of the smartest play is to just sit in a fucking corner for, like, 15 minutes. And then whittle him down bit by bit. But it's even tougher, actually, without the axe. The axe is the best sub-weapon for killing Dracula, because it can You can hit him multiple times easily if you throw from below, or if you just throw like when he's on even ground with you. If you're not doing the jump, turn, throw with the axe, which is what I had to do in a lot of situations, then it's very easy to throw multiple axes at it. But in that situation, um, it's not. And the only other like semi-viable sub-weapon is the cross, but I think the axe is just way better. Another reason it's way better is that they made Dracula's weak point very small and very specific, where his head is not his weak point. His weak point is like something like his neck, like something between like his neck and his necklace. It's utterly inexplicable to me. Um, but I will give credit where credit is due and say that this Dracula fight does feel more climactic than the Dracula fight in Rondo Blood. It's probably the only single solitary thing about this game you could say is in any way, shape, or form preferable, even if only slightly, to Rondo Blood. Because the Dracula fight is more climactic and more intense and more stressful, but also, I think, designed more poorly and less fun to actually play. I mean, it's fun to figure it out. It's fun to like execute the pattern correctly, but it's not fun to sit and wait for like a minute on end or 2 minutes on end because Dracula's fucking around somewhere else in the arena and you can't see him and you can't hit him. That's the first video. There's gonna be 2 more coming. I'll try to be more high energy in the next ones and have more insight. Until then, have a good day. This game is not very good. Sorry.